to Football's Golden Oldies from the Toll House Inn, Lancaster, and this talk is about the World Cups of 1930 and 34. The very first meeting of FIFA took place in Paris in 1904, without the benefit of British attendance, and decided rather grandly that it alone had the right to organise a World Championship. The president of FIFA was Jules Rimet from 1920 to 1954, and the secretary was Henri Delaney from 1919 until his death in 1956, a little before the death of the 83-year-old Rimet. 2 years later, Britain withdrew from FIFA over the question of broken time payments, a term from the 1800s, where amateur players began to claim compensation for time away from work to travel to and play in matches. In 1928, in Amsterdam, where Uruguay retained their title at the Olympics against a strong challenge from Argentina, 2-1 after a replay, Secretary Delaney proclaimed the World Cup should be put in place where it should be played. There were 5 aspirants: Italy, Holland, Spain, Sweden and Uruguay, who made an extraordinary offer for a country of 2 million people. They would pay all travelling and hotel expenses for visiting teams and build a new stadium for the tournament, to be built in 8 months in central Montevideo to celebrate 100 years of independence. Faced by such enthusiasm, what could the European countries do but withdraw altogether? None of the 4 disappointed European countries made the trip to Uruguay, which in those days took a wearying 3 weeks. 13 countries only allotted the World Cup at FIFA's 1929 Congress in Barcelona. Uruguay found themselves 2 months before it was due to kick off without a single European entrant. In addition to the 4 mentioned previously, Austria, Hungary, Germany, Switzerland and Czechoslovakia said no. The British were out of FIFA. Belgium, Romania and Yugoslavia vacillated. Embittered, insulted, the Latin American federations threatened to withdraw from FIFA, a threat they would be making many times in the years to come. Belgium, Romania and Yugoslavia finally agreed to go, so there would be 4 European entrants, but not even with the greatest feat of imagination could they be ranked among the elite. The bitterness in Montevideo was scarcely assuaged. King Carol, the German-speaking king of Romania, was never popular in the country, so he picked the team himself and put immense pressure on the companies who employed the players to give them time off to make the trip. Chile, Mexico, Argentina and France in Pool 1, Brazil, Bolivia and Yugoslavia in Pool 2, Peru, Uruguay and Romania in Pool 3, and Paraguay, USA and Belgium in Pool 4, completing the entry of 13 teams. The 4 European teams, whose boat had picked up the Brazilians en route, were tumultuously welcomed in Montevideo, though none had been seeded head of a group, a distinction reserved for Uruguay, Argentina, Brazil and the USA. World Cup starts. Uruguay were unquestionably the favourites, though their fine team of the 1924 and 1928 Olympics was fractionally past its peak. Nevertheless, it had home advantage and its still abundant talent in its favour, and it's arguable that it would have won the tournament whatever European teams had come, even England, Scotland and the formidable Austrian Wunder team. The new Centenary Stadium was, alas, still unfinished, thanks to heavy rain. Early matches had to be played on the grounds of Penarol and Nacional clubs, Pasito and Central Park. On Sunday afternoon, July 3rd, 1930, France opened the tournament against Mexico with a 4-1 win, although their admirable and spectacular goalkeeper, Alex Thibault, was kicked on the jaw after 10 minutes, being replaced by left-half Chantrel, no substitutes for another 40 years. The captain of France was right-half Alex Villaplan, who would ultimately be shot by the French resistance for collaborating with the Nazis. 2 days later, France faced Argentina and were most unlucky to go down 1-0. Argentina, always true to form. Argentina scored after about 80 minutes, and 3 minutes later Marcel Longuia raced the length of the field for what would have been the equaliser, but Almeida Rego, the Brazilian referee, suddenly blew for time. Instant chaos. While Argentina fans invaded the pitch of Central Park, the French players assailed the referee, insisting there were 6 minutes left. Mounted police galloped onto the field. Senor Rego consulted his watch and his linesman, and at last, raising his arms, cried to the heavens that he had erred in good faith. Do you believe it? Cerro, the Argentinian inside left, fainted. The game resumed and the remaining minutes petered uneventfully away. Argentina complained accordingly to the organising committee, threatening to go home, thus sounding what had become a tediously familiar note. When I read this, my mind went back to 1966 and Al Franzi calling them animals and stopping George Cohen from exchanging his shirt at the end of the game. Leopards do not change their spots. Once a cheat, always a cheat. First World Cup goal. France winger Lucien Laurent scored the first goal in FIFA World Cup history for France against Mexico on July 13, 1930. Estadio Pocitos in Montevideo, Uruguay, and he was presented with the fine trophy seen on the right. Laurent scored in the 19th minute of the game, with 2 more France goals coming shortly after, before half-time. France scored once more in the second half, and the game finished 4-1 in favour of France. Fewer than 5,000 fans witnessed the game, with that number, including the Argentinian team, on hand to scout their Group 1 opponents. Unfortunately for Laurent and France, this game represented the high point of their World Cup, with successive 1-0 defeats to Argentina and Chile ending their title hopes. Pool 1, top side into semi-finals. France opened convincingly against Mexico, but after the Argentina debacle, they went down 1-0 to Chile. Argentina played a tempestuous game against Chile, winning 3-1, but only after the brutal Monti kicked Torres, left half for Chile, who retaliated, and both teams indulged in a protracted brawl, which was only broken up with great difficulty by the police. It all reminds you of the 1966 match, England against Argentina, which was a disgrace to football. And you can see in Pool 1, Argentina at the top, followed up by Chile in second place. Pool 2, top side into semi-finals. Yugoslavia unexpectedly toppled Brazil 2-1, who were individually cleverer and collectively inferior. Each team then beat Bolivia 4-0, and the Yugoslavs went through to the semi-finals where they would meet the hosts, Uruguay. Pool 3, top side into the semi-finals. Romania and Uruguay both beat Peru, but for the crucial game to decide who would progress, Uruguay brought in Scaroni and their new star Pellegrini Anselmo for Castro and Petroni, winning 4-0 in a canter to qualify. Pool 4, top side into the semi-finals. The United States, with their strong defence and breakaway attacks, routed Belgium and Paraguay in turn 3-0. But would this style of play be enough to overcome Argentina in the semi-finals? The first semi-final, 80,000 spectators watched Uruguay dispatch Yugoslavia after sustaining the shock of the fourth minute goal by Sekuli. Chia and Anselmo made it 2-1, but then Yugoslavia were refused an equaliser on a controversial offside decision. In the second half, Uruguay scored 4 with Chia adding 2. Next day, Argentina joined them in a final which would be a repetition of the Olympic final of 1928. The second semi-final. The much greater pace and sophistication of Argentina simply overwhelmed the USA, who crashed to a 6-1 defeat, precisely the score by which Uruguay trounced Yugoslavia. The half-time score was only 1-0, but in the second half the Americans simply fell apart, conceding 5 more, the last 3 within 9 minutes, 2 to the speedy right winger, Purcell. James Brown, their own outside right from Scotland, scored for the United States. The 1928 Olympic football tournament in the Netherlands. Until 1928, the Olympic football tournament had represented the World Championship of Football. 1920, 14 teams, 1924, 22 teams, and 1928 tournaments, 17 teams, all had greater participation than that of the first World Cup in 1930. This presented a significant problem for the governing body FIFA, since the tournament, though organised and run by FIFA, was an event subject to the ethical foundation that underpinned the Olympic movement. At the time, all Olympic competitors had to maintain an amateur status, whereas professionalism was dominant in football. Increasingly, FIFA had sought to appease those nations that required concessions in order that players could participate in the Olympics. This required there to be an acceptance that irregular payments could be made to players by national associations, the so-called broken time payments, by which loss of pay and expenses would be met. On February 17, 1928, the 4 home associations of the United Kingdom voted unanimously to withdraw from FIFA in opposition to the manner in which the governing body was seeking to dictate on such matters, and, as was noted, that the 4 associations be free to conduct their affairs in the way their long experience has shown them to be desirable. Uruguay drew with Argentina 1-1 on June 10, 1928 at the Olympic Stadium before winning the replay 2-1 on June 18, 1928 at the same venue. The third place match was won by Italy, who defeated Egypt 11-3. Even the officials were in danger. John Langenus, chosen as had been expected to referee the match, demanded the safety of himself and his linesmen be guaranteed. And only a few hours before kick-off did his fellow referees authorise him to preside. In Buenos Aires, the excitement was phenomenal. 10 packet boats were chartered to take the fans across the River Plate to Montevideo, but they were insufficient. Thousands of desperate fans thronged the streets, clamouring for more boats. Build up to the final. When the boats sailed at 10 o'clock on the eve of the final, they left behind thousands on the quayside, letting off fireworks and chanting victory or death. Arriving in Montevideo, the Argentinians were searched for revolvers by customs and police and searched again at the entrance to the Centenary Stadium, which limited the attendance to 90,000. The Argentinian team had been under a police guard day and night, mounted police escorting their coach to and from each training session and around the stadium. Soldiers with fixed bayonets kept the crowds moving, and after all this there was still the question of the match ball. Each team insisted on a ball of native manufacture, a point which had not been covered in the regulations. So it was decided that the referee, John Languinus, should toss up on the field, which he did, to a fusillade of firecrackers. The host should decide which ball to play with, or FIFA should bring in a law that guarantees the same ball is used all over the world. Argentina won the toss. The game. Long afterwards, the sole survivor of Argentina's team, Pancho Varallo, accused Hardman Monti, the centre-half, of being in a state of panic after receiving death threats, saying that in the dressing room before the kick-off, Monti feared he would be killed and threatened not to play. Throughout the game, Monti was in such a state of terror as to be virtually a passenger, effectively meaning that Argentina were reduced to 10 men. Dorado gave Uruguay the lead, only for Posel to equalise, and Stabile put the Argentinians further in front with a hotly disputed goal. After half-time, Thiers scored. Uruguay had broken the spell, and Iriarte gave them the lead before Castro and Selmo's understudy smashed the ball into the roof of the net. Uruguay had won an exciting and surprisingly good-tempered game, 4-2. Motorhomes blared in triumph, ships blew their sirens in the port, flags and banners flew, and the next day was proclaimed a national holiday. The golden 50,000 franc cup was handed to Nasazzi by Jules Rimet. In Buenos Aires, the Uruguayan consulate was stormed by an infuriated mob until police dispensed it by opening fire. The World Cup was well and truly launched. Is it just me, but this surely is not an atmosphere in which to play a game of football? Police and soldiers armed with deadly weapons, but every World Cup in South America seems to be tarnished with brutality and mob rule. World Cup 1934 from the Toll House in Lancaster. Background to Italy 1934. The 1934 tournament was more high-powered and highly competitive, though for the first and only time the holders did not defend. Uruguay, still piqued by the defection of the European countries in 1930, and plagued by periodic player strikes, stayed at home. The tournament had been assigned to Italy at the Stockholm Congress of 1932, where it was realised that it could no longer be confined to a single city, nor to a country without huge resources, and the fascist government picked up the check. This time it would be a knockout competition with 16 teams in the first round, a dispensation which meant that Brazil and Argentina came over 8,000 miles to play just one game. 32 teams had entered the qualifying tournament, 22 from Europe, 8 from the Americas, 1 each from Asia and Africa, none from Britain. First round. Curiously, an eliminating match took place before the tournament proper in Rome between Mexico and the United States, who won with only 2 survivors from their 1930 semi-final team that were then thrashed in the same Stadio Torino by Italy 7-1. Both South American teams went out at once. In Genoa, Spain won 3-1 against Brazil, and Argentina went down 3-2 to Sweden, their team including not a single member of the 1930 side. In Turin, France did better than expected against the Austrians, who won 3-2 in extra time with a most dubious goal. Germany was startled by Belgium, who led 2-1 at half-time, but then the team blew up, with Konan, German centre-forward, completing his hat-trick as Germany won 5-2. In Trieste, the fancied Czechs survived a fright by Romania before winning 2-1. Hungary were given a surprisingly hard time by Egypt in Naples, winning only 4-2. Switzerland beat Holland 3-2 in Milan when one of their goals came from a shot which hit a bump in the ground and was crazily diverted. Second round. Italy would play Spain in Florence, Austria and Hungary, those old foes, would meet in Bologna. In Florence, Italy were rough, the referee weak as Spain took the lead, but Italy equalised through Ferrari. And in extra time, Pozzo switched Schiavo and Guaita, but the switch was unproductive. For the replay, the following day, Pozzo only wanted volunteers, and there were 3 changes. Pizziolo had broken his leg, while Di Maria and Burrell had their only game of the competition. Spain, by contrast, were able to use only 4 of their previous team, bringing in Noguet, a reserve who stood in for Zamora and Bosch. The left winger was hurt in the 4th minute, and 8 minutes later, Meazza rose gracefully towards his corner and headed Italy into the semi-finals. In Bologna, Austrian manager Hugo Messel described the game as a brawl, not an exhibition of football. And 6 minutes after half-time, Zizek made it 2-0, and the match started to get rough, and when Sarossi reduced the arrears from the penalty, things grew rougher still, with Hungary's right winger Markos getting himself foolishly sent off just when his team threatened to equalise. As it was, they pressed gamely on till the end, but Austria, calmer and better as a team, had deserved their win and had found new life. Second round continued. In Turin, the Czechs won the best match of the round against the combative Swiss, and the game swung and swayed, but Czechoslovakia always seemed to have the resources of skill, stamina and confidence, running out winners by 3-2. In Milan, heavy rain did not prevent a large crowd. Mushroomed with umbrellas and checkered with swastika flags from attending the Sweden-Germany game. Germany, with one inside forward line deep, the other upfield, met a team of similar Nordic propensities. Solid rather than skillful, and had slightly the better of the first half. In the 57th minute, Kroon, the left winger, had a golden chance 10 yards from goal, but shot wide, and Sweden's chance had gone, as 3 minutes later Holman Germany's inside right, scored, and then soon after he got a far more spectacular goal, beating both Swedish backs before slotting the ball coolly past goalkeeper Rydberg. Sweden soon after lost their left arm, Andersson, who was injured, but they kept fighting gamely, and Dunker scored a consolation, if irrelevant, goal. Semi-final, Italy versus Austria. Played in Milan, by rights the Italians should have been tired, but a deluge of rain created a heavy surface which the Vienna school found anathema. The only goal was scored by the Argentinian right winger, Guata, in a clever move following a corner after 18 minutes. The Austrians, Zizek and Sandelar, were sternly marked by Monti, who played for Argentina in the 1930 World Cup final, and the heavy conditions disadvantaged Austria severely. The Austrians did not have a shot at goal until the 42nd minute, which was as well for Italy as they turned on the pressure for a quarter of an hour after the interval, and in the last minute Zizek picked up a clearance from his goalkeeper, tore through the Italian defence while the crowd watched, silent and aghast, but he shot wide and Italy had reached the final. Semi-final, Czechoslovakia versus Germany. The crowd, including Mussolini in his yachting cap, as you can see on the photograph, was neutral and restrained as the Czechs took the initiative. After 21 minutes, Nejedly scored and Czechoslovakia became a little complacent. The second half saw them regain their grip until their captain and goalkeeper, Planica, made a terrible error, watching a long shot sail over him into the net. 10 minutes later, the Czechs took the lead again, and Germany collapsed, with Nejedly dribbling fluently through the German defence to add a third. Third place game. 3 days before the final, Germany consoled themselves with victory in the third place match in Naples against a dejected Austria. Germany scored after only 24 seconds, and Koeman added a second before Haworth reduced the arrears, and for a while Austria made Germany look ploddingly inadequate. But Germany scored a third before a 30-yard free kick from left-back Svesta made it 3-2. Play became rough, but Germany survived. The final. Rome had been curiously phlegmatic about the tournament, and even for the final there were surprising gaps on the terraces. It was perhaps a pity the game was not played in the north, for the Stadio Nacional, with its pitch of less than regulation size, its less than capacity crowd, was hardly an ideal arena. The two captains were goalkeepers Combi and Planica, surely a record. There was no goal till the 70th minute, when Puig struck a long shot to Combi's right. Italy were one down. 82nd minute, Orsi, another Argentinian, placed a swerving shot beyond Planica's desperate fingers. Extra time, and a limping Miazza passed to Guata, who made ground before finding Schiavo, who beat Citrocchi and shot past Planica. Italy had not only won the World Cup, they had made a profit of £1 million in the process, and the more sceptical wondered if they would have won anywhere else. 4 years later, they would get their answer. Next tournament in 1938, France. By 1938 and the Third World Cup, Europe was in turmoil. The Anschluss had swallowed up Austria, whose best players had been greedily snatched by the German national team. Spain was in the throes of civil war. Uruguay declined to come to France, as did Argentina, who were still sulking because France's candidature had been preferred to their own at FIFA's Congress at the Opera Crawl, Berlin. The tournament included, for the first and only time to date, the Cubans, Poles and Dutch East Indies. Once more, despite distances and early eliminations, the competition was to follow a knockout pattern. I hope you enjoyed my talk and look for the next in 1938.